Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. In particular, I do want to thank the Honourable Jason Kenney, Premier of Alberta, the Honourable Rick McIver, Minister of Transportation, Janet Riopel, President and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, for being here for this important announcement. I also want to thank my friend, and in many ways my colleague, Ward 9 Edmonton City Councillor Tim Catmull, for being here as well. Councillor Catmull and I share a lot of political ground, and we are both passionate about making life better for the families and businesses in Southwest Edmonton, an entire city and our capital region. Southwest Edmonton is the fastest growing part of Alberta's capital city. This tremendous growth, particularly over the past 10 years, has had many positives. Many young families have chosen to lay down roots in Southwest Edmonton. Many businesses have chosen to open up shop there. And many seniors have chosen to retire in Southwest Edmonton. But this growth has led to challenges as well, particularly the significant traffic congestion we see on Terwillegar Drive, the road you see in the picture behind me. More than 40,000 cars drive on Terwillegar Drive each and every day. As a parent who drives this road every single day to take my children to school and to go to work, I know how bad the situation has become. The people of Southwest Edmonton have been waiting for a long time to see this project completed. This was one of the top concerns I heard at the doors when I was campaigning in 2018 and 2019. And as the only government MLA and cabinet minister from Edmonton, I was determined to ensure their voices were heard at the government table. I do want to thank the Premier and my colleagues for supporting and helping move this project forward. The City of Edmonton has committed to widening the Terwillegar Drive through Phase 1 of the overall Terwillegar expansion project. Today, we are here to make a significant infrastructure announcement surrounding the completion of Phase 2 of the project and the completion of the overall Terwillegar Drive expansion. This announcement is part of Alberta's economic recovery plan, and it shows that our government is walking the talk with serious investments in Alberta and Edmonton that will get our people back to work and our economy back on track. With that, I want to turn the microphone over to Premier Kenney for some further details on this very important announcement. Premier.
Thanks very much, Casey, and I'm pleased to be here for an important announcement about building infrastructure and creating jobs in Edmonton's fast-growing southwest quadrant as part of Alberta's economic recovery plan. With me, as you've heard, is Minister Madhu, as well as Ward 9 Edmonton Councillor Tim Catmull, President of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, Janet Riopel, and Minister McIver from Transportation. I want to thank them all for joining us. We were supposed to be doing this outside in the southwest, but the weather did not cooperate in this very wet summer that we're having. So let me just say that for several weeks in March and April, there was virtually no morning or afternoon rush hour on Terwillegar because of the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing so many people to stay at home. For those who continue to drive to work, and Casey and Tim can attest to this as local residents who commute downtown to the legislature and City Hall, I'm sure it was a wonderful change from gridlock to free-flowing traffic in the spring this year. But thanks to Alberta's excellent pandemic planning and response by Alberta Health Services, and thanks to the tremendous personal responsibility and sacrifices made by Albertans, we got the virus under control faster than the vast majority of provinces and countries, with far fewer hospitalizations and COVID deaths. This allowed us in Alberta to start lifting public health restrictions and reopening our economy sooner and more broadly than the vast majority of places around North America and Europe, and that is good news. The bad news is that rush hour gridlock is almost back to normal down on Terwillegar Drive in the southwest of our capital city. But here's the best news. Today, the Government of Alberta is announcing, as part of Alberta's Economic Recovery Plan, a $120 million job-creating investment to widen, expand, and improve Terwillegar Drive and other transportation infrastructure in southwest Edmonton in a project that will create 865 new jobs. The work will include widening Terwillegar to 4 lanes each way from Rabbit Hill Road to across Anthony Henday Drive and all the way south to Windermere Boulevard. A second overpass will be built over the Henday, and the intersections at 23rd Avenue, Haddow Drive, and Windermere Boulevard will all see major improvements. Plus, for all the folks who have discovered or rediscovered the joys of walking and biking during the pandemic, and that includes a heck of a lot of Albertans, this project will also include construction of a new multi-use trail on the East Boulevard of Terwillegar and a new pedestrian bridge over the white mud connecting the multi-use trail from Brookview to Brookside. As I said, this project, which is expected to create about 865 new jobs, is part of Alberta's recovery plan, our bold, ambitious strategy to build Alberta, diversify our economy, get Albertans back to work, and catapult our province out of the COVID-19 recession back to growth and prosperity. The COVID crash of the global economy and of global oil prices hit just as we were starting to rebound from 5 years of economic stagnation. Now we're faced with, frankly, depression-era levels of unemployment, officially at 15%, but in reality probably closer to 25%. Alberta's government has helped to keep this economy on life support over the past 3 months with some $14 billion of direct support to individuals and families, to job creators, small businesses, through job creation programs, through our healthcare system, and also through tax, fee, and loan reductions, deferrals, and much more. But as bad as things got, we were able to keep 85% of businesses operating within new safe guidelines, representing about 95% of Alberta's economy, way more than other places that went into near total lockdown. And that means we are better positioned than most for a rapid and robust recovery, but nobody believes that that's going to happen overnight. In the meantime, our top priority must be getting Albertans back to work. That's why we're taking actions like the Small Business Restart Grant to get entrepreneurs back in business and their employees back to work, and applications for that opened about 10 days back. Wherever possible, our actions to create jobs are connected to our long-term economic goals. Our $1.5 billion investment, for example, in the Keystone XL pipeline is a good example. It immediately creates thousands of jobs, but after the oil starts flowing, it'll generate tens of billions of dollars that will benefit Albertans and generate government revenues for decades to come. The same two goals underpin every part of our economic recovery plan. It includes the largest infrastructure build in Alberta history, the largest per capita of any Canadian province, with $10 billion in projects that will move people from unemployment to good jobs right now, building roads, bridges, overpasses, water projects, pipelines, gas lines, schools, hospitals, long-term care homes for seniors, drug treatment centers for people coping with addiction, tourism infrastructure, and much, much more. This will spur the creation of thousands, and by the way, we estimate that $10 billion build this year will create something like 50,000 full-time jobs. It will spur the creation of thousands of other jobs for subcontractors, suppliers, small businesses, hotels, restaurants in every corner of the province. This infrastructure plan, which represents a 40% increase over what we had initially budgeted for this fiscal year, is really about building the diverse architecture of Alberta's future economy. Today's announcement is all about that. The recovery plan that I outlined last week included $600 million in additional funding for some 10 strategic infrastructure projects that will create jobs, while making our economy more productive, more competitive in the long run. This Terwillegar Drive project is one of those 10 projects. The southwest part of our great capital city has been growing by leaps and bounds for years, and there are more new subdivisions on the drawing boards further south. The folks who already live in southwest Edmonton, especially the 40,000 who use Terwillegar each weekday to get to and from work and school, have been seeking relief from chronic traffic congestion for decades. This project will finally complete the widening of Terwillegar Drive from the White Mud to Windermere Boulevard, making it easier and faster for commuters to get all the way from Ellerslie Road and beyond to the heart of the capital city. So Alberta is creating jobs today to improve the economic efficiency of this great city and the quality of life for Edmontonians in years to come. So thanks to Casey, Tim, and Janet, and everyone else who pushed so hard for this project. Today's announcement is the richly deserved reward for your patience and perseverance. And now we'll hear, I believe, from Tim and Janet. Councillor, thank you.
Well, good morning, Premier Kenney, Minister Madu, Minister McIver, and Ms. Riopel. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. This is terrific news for the residents of Southwest Edmonton. As Premier Kenney outlined, this project will see Terwillegar Drive widen to 4 lanes in each direction with a dedicated transit lane in each direction. It will see improvements at all of the intersections along Terwillegar Drive from the White Mud interchange across the Henday and to Windermere Boulevard. It will see improvements on the White Mud Terwillegar interchange and on the Rainbow Valley Bridge. And it will, very importantly, provide the ability for the City of Edmonton to layer on premier mass transit service to the southwest corner of Edmonton, which quite frankly cannot be done without these improvements to Terwillegar Drive. When I was campaigning for City Council in 2017, a recurring theme of that campaign was that the transportation system in southwest Edmonton was woefully inadequate. We had been and continue to be the fastest growing part of Edmonton, and yet we had seen the least amount of infrastructure investment over the years to service that growth. This is, in essence, one of the last pieces of the puzzle. We have seen the City of Edmonton fund $102 million in the first phase of Terwillegar Drive, which would include those areas north of Rabbit Hill Road, including improvements to the White Mud Terwillegar interchange and across the Rainbow Valley Bridge. And with the provincial funding today, we see $120 million in funding that moves the second half of the project forward, and very importantly includes that second bridge over Anthony Henday Drive. This is the bottleneck that I know my friend Minister Madu finds himself in every morning trying to get across the Henday, which is a great road, but which is, when you're crossing it, really difficult. So this bridge is really important. We are seeing a collection of projects in southwest Edmonton now with the improvement of Terwillegar Drive and the adding of lanes each direction on Anthony Henday Drive in the southwest corner, where we're finally seeing the transportation network in this corner of the city get to where it needs to be to service the demand that is already there. When we layer on next generation technologically enabled intelligent traffic control systems, we will see volume throughput, we will see capacity on this road that will rival any in Edmonton. So again, it is a very, very welcome investment. And I thank the province very much for seeing the wisdom of making this investment in our corner of the city. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Premier, so nice to see you. It's been a little while now that we haven't seen each other. Minister, and Councillor Cartmel, thank you so much for including the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce in this announcement today. You know, this announcement is just great news for businesses across our entire Edmonton metropolitan region and far beyond, and it's been a really long time coming. I mean, who amongst us, and I'll bet anyone in this room, has experienced frustrating delays as you're trying to navigate your way across Terwillegar and the White Mud. It just happens. It's happened all too long for decades, as has been noted. The enhancements announced today, they're going to ease really lengthy commutes. That's certain. But perhaps even more importantly, they're going to provide much needed stimulus by injecting capital into our economy. Boy, capital that we desperately need right now, creating hundreds of new, well-paying jobs. And you know, the trickle-down and the trickle-up effect of those jobs into families across our community, it can't be underestimated. It strengthens our businesses, and it strengthens each and every individual that's connected to those businesses. And as Premier noted, to the suppliers and the customers, it's got a huge rippling out effect. You know, with COVID-19 continuing to absolutely hammer businesses and families, this is exactly the kind of investment that we need right now, focused, targeted, and really strategic infrastructure spending. It's going to boost traffic flows along one of our largest trade corridors, too. And that actually has to be really enhanced. We can bring our people and our products and our services across our region much more efficiently, much more expeditiously, much more freely. So we really appreciate and congratulate the province of Alberta and the city of Edmonton for coming together in this very strong collaboration and making this project the reality that we really need it to be. Thanks so much.
Okay, before we get the Q&A started, I'll remind those on the phone that in addition to the...
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I just want to say on behalf of Alberta Transportation, this is a strong project. When we think about making things better, we think about transportation in terms of networks. And Terwillegar Drive is a terrific example of where we're going to make the network within the city of Edmonton stronger through connecting Terwillegar Drive in a much better way between the Whitewood and the Anthony Henday. And we're going to make the provincial network stronger. This project, along with the extra lanes being added to the Anthony Henday right now, will make the network not only stronger in Edmonton, not only in the capital region, but actually all across Alberta. And that's the kind of, I think, smart infrastructure decisions that will help build jobs now during construction and help support jobs for decades into the future, which is what our government under the Premier's leadership have committed to do. So I wanted to just say that Alberta Transportation strongly supports the project that we're talking about today. I want to thank the Premier, Minister Madhu. I want to thank Councillor Cartmel and Janet in the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce for all being here today, because I think this really speaks to both the potential and I think real improvement to the quality of life for everyday citizens going to and from work and school, and also to the long-term commitment and long-term health of the economy and jobs, not only here, but all across Alberta. So to me, that makes this a very good news day, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
All right, we'll get the Q&A started. We have obviously the Premier, Minister Madhu, Minister McIver, Councillor Cartmel, and Ms. Riopel available to answer questions. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Question comes from James Keller of the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Hi there. This is a question for the Premier. Can you explain why you picked Dave Rodney for this Texas appointment, especially given his lack of any experience related to the energy file? And how would you explain the optics that this looks like essentially payback for him giving up his legislature seat to you?
Well, as you know, we have indicated for some time we'll be opening an office for Alberta to promote investment in the global energy capital of Houston. If Texas were a country, it would be our second largest trading partner on earth after Illinois. So the volume of trade with Texas alone exceeds that of all of Asia, all of Europe, all of Latin America. So this is a critical market for Alberta. It's part of our Invest Alberta agency. We introduced legislation to create that agency tomorrow. We'll be taking our network of global trade promotion offices that we've had for decades and refocusing their mandate increasingly on encouraging inbound capital investment to create jobs here in Alberta. We'll continue, of course, to do trade promotion, both through the Houston office and the others, but investment is really the critical thing. The biggest strategic problem in Alberta's economy in recent years has been the flight of tens of billions of dollars of capital. We need to reverse that, bring the capital back here. And so obviously the Houston office will also work closely with our Washington, D.C. office in interacting with U.S. Political decision makers in Texas and proximate states in the Sun Belt and the Southwest of the United States. So there will be a kind of a diplomatic function in that office as well as a commercial one. So this will be partly about trade promotion, partly about investment promotion, and partly about interfacing with the government of Texas, other U.S. Southwest states, and federal senators and Congress people who come from that region of the United States, which is so closely connected to Alberta. So I'm excited that Dave's agreed to take this on. Dave was one of the longest-serving members of the legislature. He served in a ministerial capacity, and I think it's very useful in positions like this to have folks with elected experience, political experience. When they sit down with governors, congresspeople, senators, mayors, and others, they understand the political decision-making process. I can tell you, when I was a federal minister, I found that many of our most effective heads of mission for Canada abroad were people who had served in elected office previously, like Premier Gordon Campbell in the United Kingdom, like Premier Gary Dewar in Washington, D.C. And that's why we've chosen both James and Dave for these positions, in part because they have a direct connection to the government. They can get our attention on critical files. They understand the reality of the elected officials with whom they will be interacting. And Dave obviously understands extremely well the economic imperative here in Alberta, representing a Calgary constituency for, I believe, 15 years in the legislature, having worked, he has done work in the past, I understand, with energy companies, and most recently, he has been leading tourism promotion efforts in the Bow Valley region, in the Canmore and the Mountain Park areas, because tourism promotion will also be a part of the Invest Alberta function. So I think it's and anybody who knows Dave knows that he is a self-starter. He is a high-energy person who is a phenomenal salesman. Who brings great energy and focus to whatever he does. So I'm excited he's taking this on. And I would just say, in terms of the second part of your question, look, Dave had approached me, I think it was in December of 2016, so what's that, 3.5 years ago, about potentially leaving his seat in the legislature. He never asked for any kind of consideration in the future. He's been working in the private sector since that time. When we were looking for somebody to appoint to Houston, we had a short list, and Dave just stood out to me as the kind of go-getter that we need.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next question comes from Chris Varco of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling that is going to prevent construction on the Keystone XL pipeline this year. First off, what is your reaction to it? Separately, should Albertans be concerned about their increasing risk in this investment? You'd noted last week that if there was a change in the U.S. administration coming out of the election, that there would have been substantial progress being made on the project with construction in 3 states that now appears to be jeopardized.
So the decision essentially continues with the status quo, where TC Energy will have to apply individually for permits for water crossings in the United States. Effectively, what the Supreme Court decision does is to narrow the application of the Montana decision to one project, Keystone XL, rather than applying it to every pipeline project in the United States. The case itself will continue to proceed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, and Alberta has retained American legal counsel to help represent our interests. I'm not sure if we made a final decision on whether we'll be, but I believe we will be filing an amicus curiae brief to support TC Energy's challenge of the original Montana court decision. And we would just point out that this project has been through exhaustive regulatory review. It received approval, or excuse me, it received a recommendation for a presidential permit under two comprehensive reviews conducted by the State Department during President Barack Obama's tenure, both of which reviews underscored that the Keystone XL pipeline will actually reduce carbon emissions as compared to the alternative, which has been moving crude by rail. So construction continues in the United States. TC Energy is focused, as per their original construction plan for 2020, on pump stations and other infrastructure. As you know, we just kicked off the Alberta spread, construction on the Alberta spread this past week in a work that will create a couple of thousand good-paying full-time construction jobs north of the border on the Alberta side. Look, it's not a revelation that a consortium, a very highly organized effort by green left pressure groups funded by major U.S. foundations is trying to kill pipelines. It's not just Keystone XL. It's the entire energy infrastructure of North America. We have an effort to shut down permanently Line 5 that has safely delivered most of the energy to the state of Michigan and Upper Ohio, the Upper Midwest, now for 60 years. That would also strangle the Ontario economy, by the way. So the message I guess we would send to policymakers of all partisan backgrounds is if we want to continue functioning as a North American economy, we need to be able to move energy, whether it's Line 3, Line 5, KXL, the existing Keystone project. So we'll continue to work with our partners in the United States to defend that existential need for energy for our economy to function and recover from the COVID recession.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Lisa Johnson of Post Media. Your line is open.
Hi. Thanks for taking my question. I think this question is for Councillor Cartmell. I'm wondering what the project will look like in terms of its original plan. I understand that the original provincial funding that was taken out of the budget last year included the purchase of electric buses. Is that still part of the plan? Is it the same? Is it different? Are there conditions attached to this funding?
Thank you for the question. So the funding that was announced previously through the ACT fund did include particular restrictions on the funding. That did include the purchase of a number of electric buses such that half the service on the road when it opened would be through electric buses, and that the other half of the service would be through electric buses by 2030. This put all kinds of constraints, not just on the road project, but on how Edmonton Transit would operate their system. Currently today, there's not a garage in southwest Edmonton that can accommodate electric buses and charge them. So it was funding, but with all of the restrictions, it didn't get us where we needed to go. When that funding was withdrawn, city administration was able to essentially reconceptualize the project such that it effectively returned to a road project that was adding lanes, albeit with a dedicated transit lane, but allows Edmonton Transit to layer on the service in the appropriate way as their plans evolve and develop. I would say that it is an ambition of the city to move to more electric buses, but that has to be done as part of a thoughtful cross-the-city plan in order to achieve that. There were other restrictions. Again, those restrictions being removed make the project rather more cost-effective and easier to deliver. You can see that through the city's own funding, which went from roughly $120-some million down to 102. And so this additional $120 million in funding extends that roadway project south to Windermere Boulevard.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller? Operator, can you please?
The next question comes from Janet French of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I just wanted to ask the Premier about Bill 32, which was tabled yesterday. So we've heard since from some critics that they say that this bill will give more power to, rich, powerful corporate leaders and take away power from individual workers to mount collective action. And they also say that unions are among your kind of most vocal critics, and that this bill is an intent to, through the back door, try and quell some of the opposition to policies that are less popular with them. So how would you respond to some of those concerns?
I would respond by saying that the exact opposite is true. That, in fact, what this bill does is to empower individual union members so that they can decide whether or not their dues will go to fund political campaigns with which they disagree. I'll give you one example. Unifor, run by Jerry Diaz out of Eastern Canada, takes forced union dues from Alberta oil field workers to campaign against the oil industry. Unifor has actively campaigned, spent union dues to oppose the Northern Gateway Pipeline, the Keystone XL Pipeline. I believe they were opposed to Energy East. They've been opposed to just about everything to create jobs in the Alberta energy sector, with union dues funded by workers in the Alberta energy sector. And what we're doing is responding to those Alberta union members who say that they don't want to be forced to finance campaigns to put them out of work. This is an empowerment of ordinary union members, and it is something we ran on. It's a campaign commitment that we made. I can tell you, we've done polling on this, which shows overwhelming public support, particularly amongst union members. Now, I know that some big union bosses don't like to be accountable to their individual members when it comes to spending money on political campaigns. But what this does is to say that union members, we believe in it, by the way, the government, we've underscored in our platform and since that we believe in the right of collective bargaining. That's reflected, of course, in the statutory amendments we've made to bring balance and workplace democracy back to labour legislation in Alberta. So we believe in that right of collective bargaining, and that has to be supported by union dues. We completely accept that, and we accept the jurisprudence around that. But at the same time, union members have every right to say that they shouldn't be forced to fund political action that opposes their own interests. I was pleased to see at least one union organization yesterday endorse the legislation, CLAC, which has tens of thousands of members here in Alberta. And again, I would say, if you're a union member in Alberta, you have every right to be representative in collective bargaining, to have those rights respected, and you have every right to ensure that the union boss doesn't take your dues to campaign against your employment.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Question comes from Tyson Fedor of CTV Calgary. Your line is open.
Hi, this question is for the Premier, and it might be a little too early as we're still waiting on Finance Minister Bill Morneau in Ottawa to drop his much-anticipated economic snapshot. But, Premier Kenney, I just want to kind of get your reaction to kind of what we're expected to see here in the next couple of minutes. We're seeing potentially a $250 to $300 billion deficit for this year. What necessary impacts would this potentially have on our province here in Alberta? And through conversations with Ottawa, what are you potentially maybe expecting from this announcement later today?
Well, I'm not quite sure what to expect. This has been advertised as not a full fiscal report by the Government of Canada. Every government in Canada and around the world is facing a fiscal crisis as a result of the largest economic contraction since the 1930s. I'm sure we'll see that reflected in federal numbers today. I guess I would say this, that while we appreciate the scale of the Government of Canada's fiscal response to the COVID crisis, and we continue to work with the federal government on many important areas, including prospective support for provincial testing and personal protective equipment, as well as, we hope, a lifting of the cap of the fiscal stabilization program and further changes to the large employer finance facility. So we continue to work with the federal government on those matters. At the same time, I would suggest that governments have to be careful as we go forward not to spend indiscriminately. The support for